Okay, we are live. Jason, thank you so much for being here today. We're going to actually jump into talking about some of the news articles that are coming out about the Bay Area specifically, and even more so about millennial homebuyers. So, Jason, do you want to quickly introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, sure. My name's Jason Stebbins. I'm right in the heart of Silicon Valley, Morgan Hill, not too far from where Christa does business. I work for Guild Mortgage. I've been a mortgage professional for 30 years. And I actually have a millennial in my life, in my son. So this will be a fun conversation to talk a little bit about what he's seeing as well and what's going on with that age group when it comes to real estate and investing and finance in general.
So you have a millennial. I am technically a millennial. I'm an elder millennial. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited to have this conversation. And I mean, as a homeowner for the past, I guess, 12 years now, I can speak from that perspective, but I love that we kind of have both of those angles covered
Yeah,
today.
he's
So
the very last of them, I think. Like he's right
yeah,
on the edge of millennial and whatever is after him. Gen Z, I think, is after him. So
we're at the polar opposite of
right,
the
right.
ends of the
Yeah,
millennial spectrum. So, and
yeah.
you're kind of close enough too. Whatever, it's fine.
It's
So, we are talking about a couple articles today. One of which came out. I read it first on Broke Agent Media. It is sourced from Lending Tree. So, I'm going to pull up this article first. This is an article basically talking about where the most popular areas are for millennial home buyers. And I always get excited when I see an article like this because I never expect it to be Bay Area, right? All you
yeah,
hear all the time is that the affordability is really low for the Bay Area. No one can buy a house, especially millennials are struggling significantly to purchase a home. And although I do agree that the prices are somewhat outrageous in Silicon Valley, there is still hope. So,
yeah.
one thing that I want to mention here, and I'll scroll down to the portion that we're discussing, but the millennials, we know this, they make up a majority of home buyers in most of the 50 largest metros. So we've been talking about this, Jason. You and I have discussed this many times over. We've talked about that millennials are going to become one of the biggest pool of buyers that we've seen historically, I believe, ever. So we know that there's great force with these buyers, and now they're saying that San Jose is one of the largest areas for millennial home buyers. So I want to talk to you about this. I want to see what your perspective is from the mortgage side of things.
Well, if you think about the fact that most of this age group of buyer are the children of the boomers, right? So you have this inheritance space where their families, their parents have lived in these markets that have since exploded. And now you're starting to see their kids in their early stages of their family, of their career, their post-collegiate professional career, are all ready to go. So the numbers that this article mentions are phenomenal from the perspective of, first of all, big old shout out to millennials because their average credit score is crazy good,
Yeah, let's
according to
get
this
down to
article.
that one. There we
Yeah, I
go.
mean
Yeah.
that's amazing. That it's amazing that that you when you see this down payment number, it's a little bit hard to actually get your mind around to say that the average home buyer in San Jose, first timer millennial home buyer, is going to have almost 150,000 to put down. But remember that this market is very unique in that the ability for them to level up their asset base because of the type of business that comes out of Silicon Valley, the fact that they're very likely second generation homeowners in this area and their parents are equity rich. Um, it's a pretty amazing statistic to see San Jose right there at the top. But also when you factor in the subculture that is Silicon Valley, maybe not as shocking. But we're also seeing cosigners happen. So whether or not that reflects in these numbers or not, I don't know. And lots of gifting, lots
Yeah.
of early inheritance distribution, lots of gift funds for mom and dad or family, or early distribution of cash that will someday be an inheritance used to get them their foot in the door in a high cost market. I mean, you look at the disparity between Denver and San Jose 1 and 2, and as far as the down payment number goes, it's pretty significant.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And I mean, I think you're 100% spot on in the sense of gifting too. I'm hearing a lot of my clients are saying, mom and dad are pitching in. And what's amazing right now, and I'm going to shrink this down for a second, but what's amazing at the moment is there's so much equity in the baby boomers element of housing, right? And there's so much money to be had there that they can easily take some of that equity and put it to their kids' future,
Yeah.
right? And to their generational wealth, which I think is just amazing. And back when we bought our first home, I guess that was 2011, so 12 years ago, we were gifted money for our down payment. And at the time, in 2011, it was really hard to put less than 20% down. And although housing was significantly less than it is now, $100,000 12 years ago was a lot of money.
Yeah.
And especially when you were renting before and rent was still expensive. I mean, we were paying over $2,000 a month. And so, it really is a substantial amount even back then. And we were beyond grateful that we had family that was able to pitch in money. And they actually absolved one of their properties, their investment properties, and then kicked that into a down payment for us. So it's a very interesting space. And I don't know how much this happens in other areas, but to hit that 144,000, it's significant, and it's nowhere near 20%, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, there's a couple qualifiers too I would mention. That article, because it comes from LendingTree data. LendingTree is a clearinghouse, so it's no surprise that in San Jose, the center of technology, that the millennial homebuyer goes to a website or an app for their preliminary foray into data analysis. That's not a surprise. In the article itself, it does mention that these are the offers that were made to millennial buyer age candidates. So it doesn't specifically talk about the closing side of it. But what it does indicate is that in those markets, that the millennial homebuyer first will go into the internet to find data, to get content, to get rate quotes, to get mortgage calculators. And so we know that that is where they live. The other thing is that's interesting is based on your previous comment is, last statistic I saw is that in the United States as a whole, 34% of homes are free and clear. They have no mortgage. So that just validates what we're saying here, is that the generation that has come before has created a real equity position of strength. And as they begin to retire, downsize, even relocate, you're going to see some of that asset base get distributed to their kids, and could very well be what helps the millennial. But let's not, take away that some of these 30 somethings are doing great, saving well and learning lessons, and they know how to get ready, right?
Yeah. And a lot of these people are also in the tech space, right? And they're using stock towards their leverage of down payment. And so there's definitely alternative ways for a lot of these people to purchase homes that aren't in the traditional, you save money and you put it as a down payment. There's some really great opportunities. And of course, it's driven by stock prices and employment here. But I'd love to actually jump into that conversation a little bit quickly. So, I know we did a live a week or two ago, whenever that was. I have no stamp on time anymore. But we spoke recently about just forbearance and what it's looking like for people right now. There's a lot of chatter and there's a lot of media talking about prices crashing and unemployment numbers increasing and people having to foreclose on homes. And I wanted to get your perspective on that as well.
Well, there's a specific article I think that you had mentioned where it said something about how some major metros were going to see price reductions that were in line with 2008 downgrades. We got to be careful with these numbers. We got to be careful with anything that's not contextualized. And this is a great example of that, because what this article doesn't tell you is how much the properties accelerated and appreciated in value. And now what we're seeing in a downgrade. I want to set aside the 25% number, because frankly, I don't know how to reconcile that with the reality of what we're seeing right now day to day. It's very difficult. But let me just mention this, because I get the phone calls too, like you do, of the client who says, yeah, how's the foreclosure activity? Maybe we could buy a bank owned, or thinking that they're speaking the same lingo that they did in the 2008, 2009 post-trauma space. It's not a thing right now in our market. In some markets, foreclosures are always higher than the national average. But remember that until the end of 2022, middle of 2022, there was zero foreclosure activity because of the forbearance program. The government wouldn't allow it during COVID and the COVID aftermath. So it's natural that in the 6 months that end 2022, you would see a spike in foreclosure rates as foreclosures went from zero to back to normal. And we still are not seeing foreclosure rates close to pre-pandemic or normal economic levels. So will there be more foreclosures? Possibly. I would be very shocked if we saw anything like what happened in 2008. And the primary reason, demand is still high and supply is still low. So, in the 2008 aftermath, of which I lived through that as a mortgage professional, the company that I worked for was one of the casualties that closed, a private company. And there's a big difference between all of a sudden supply being off the charts as people gave the keys back to banks and walked away from home ownership and just said, forget it, I'm upside down. As supply spiked like crazy, then of course you saw price points collapse. And the very anchor point, which is the mortgage being toxic and flawed all the way through to Wall Street, of course, that was a very unique, weird time. Many of the underpinnings of the mortgage banking industry and real estate industry are much more solid and have no failures built in like that one did. So, but ultimately, demand and supply. Right now, supply. I mean, you're a real estate agent. You see it every day. Supply has not recovered.
Right. Well, and I want to interrupt you quickly because I had to grab my notebook because I get so excited about this stuff. And I actually just did a podcast about this recently with a few other agents in these key markets that they talked about in this Goldman Sachs article. But I wrote down, because I love numbers, but memorizing numbers isn't my forte. But in 2018 in the San Jose Metro, we had 5,900 active homes on the market. Could you guess? I mean, I know you're not a realtor, so you don't have the same idea, but how many active homes did we have right now? How many do we probably have in the San Jose Metro? Do you have any idea?
I would say it's 50% of
that. Even less, 479 homes active on the market. So we're going from, let's round up 500 to 6,000 homes. So that number is so astonishing to me. And this is pure data that I pulled from the MLS, historical data, 59 active homes in the San Jose Metro in 2008. And now we're at less than 500 homes.
Yeah. So the reality is that higher interest rates tempered demand a little bit. They certainly did. When you went from a national average of 2.99 or 3.1 to a national average of 7.1 in the early part of December 2022, people were frozen. Sellers weren't listing, buyers weren't buying. It was very quiet. But now, as that's kind of become normalized and rates in the sixes has kind of become a thing and everyone's getting their mind around it and buy downs are back and there's options, the families that are out shopping are walking into pretty crowded open houses, and in some cases never makes it to open house. And if you don't mind, anecdotally, I'll tell a story of a family that we're helping right now. They've been very focused on a neighborhood in our town of Morgan Hill, and a single story in that neighborhood, very rare to find for them. And a house came up from the very brokerage that they were being represented by. 2 weeks early, they had a chance. And they said, well, we're going to wait. We're going to watch. We're going to go to the open house. We want to, it's a little bit on a corner. We don't love the bit, they had other list of why they didn't. The house listed and sold in less than 72 hours, and they never even got a chance to go in it. So that's more of a reality of what we see in our market.
Right. And I mean, the people that are writing these articles aren't in it. They don't have boots on the ground. Sorry, my dog is barking. I hope it's not very loud coming through, but they don't have boots. They don't have boots on the ground like we are doing every single day, right? I mean, that's the reality, is that, articles can say everything that they want to say. They don't really have a leg to stand on, but what we're experiencing every single day when I'm taking my clients out, when you're experiencing it from the mortgage perspective, you're seeing what we all are in this market, right? Things are selling if they're priced correctly, if they're marketed correctly, and they're high interest, they're selling very quickly. We're back to having some offer deadlines. Yes, the days on market show higher, but we are 30 days behind on data every single time that new set is released, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I just did a video. It's coming out next week on the Morgan Hill and Gilroy market update. And I did say that this is old data, but it's all we can do, right? Mm-hmm. And I can't make up information. I would love to say, here's what we're looking at, but I'm not going to have that solid data until a month from now. Yeah. And we're still looking at December data. The full 30 days is from December. And those were things that people made offers on in December and now closing in January. So we're not going to see this until probably the beginning of March, really, how this is affecting our data and our market from that perspective. Yeah. But same thing. I mean, we're seeing increased demand, increased interest. And from my perspective and from my client's perspective, there just isn't enough on the market for them to make offers on. This is the biggest issue right now, is that there's not enough inventory. 12 homes sold in Morgan Hill in January. 12 homes. That's not a lot.
It's not a lot.
And only, I think, 36 on the market. I mean, very, very small numbers.
Yeah. And we had a little bit of a lift in interest rates in the early part of the year. This last 2 weeks, the data has started to cause rates to creep back up again. So we're back in the mid sixes. So that interest rate roller coaster, I don't know when will level out. I mean, the only thing I can say is that at some point, the largest borrower of funds is the government of the United States of America. So at some point, they're not going to want to borrow at super high interest rates either. So, but the reality is when you think about it, especially for the millennial home buyer, and I think nationally, the average age of the home buyers nationally was like 36. So that's right, sweet in that millennial sweet spot, right? So the reality is that think about the fact that, first of all, there's no other country in the world that you can fix the cost of housing for 30 years. Yeah. Right? So this 30-year fixed mortgage is kind of a blessing. And then people say, yeah, but rates. Well, yeah, but let's talk about it. If interest rates are high and you need to buy a house and you buy a home, you've fixed the cost of shelter. You've fixed it. So if interest rates go up, you're going to look at your 6.5% rate and go, boy, am I glad we bought when it was 6.5. If interest rates go down, you have the refinance environment that is constant and always ever present and available to help you continually reduce the cost. But really, we have to look at the interest rate as being the thing that we set to the side as most of our decision making, unless it creates affordability issues.
Of course.
But unless we see massive economic change to the negative, unless we see some unforeseen circumstance that creates the kind of damage inside of the economy that we don't foresee, pandemic being one that we saw recently, unless supply recovers, demand, especially in these three metros that we mentioned early, which are high demand metros, will continue to be very high.
Agreed. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the primary driver in this market. I have a hard time believing that we're going to see even more declines if things keep tracking the way that they do. Right. And I really, really believe that things will improve in the next 6 to 12 months. I think that the more people become confident in what the market is, and the more people are comfortable with it, and they figure out how to get creative with, financing, and also with seller credits, things like this. I think the more that happens, the more we're going to see activity increase, so long as we get some more inventory, because right now it's not looking great.
Yeah.
we need more houses.
Yeah,
This
no
is
doubt.
this is the reality. And I have clients that are expanding where they want to buy a house because they just can't find anything locally. I mean, it's definitely a problem. I know we've gone through inventory issues many times in the past, and what it does is it creates a little bit of a hectic interest around the homes that do come on the market. So that's exactly what we're seeing right now. So I don't want to get this to be too long. We're already at 20 minutes, but Jason, thank you so much. Do you have any final words before we wrap this up?
Well, the only thing I would say, which you and I had talked about briefly, was just a reminder, because the construct around home buying and getting pre-approved and all that can seem very daunting, especially if there are preconceived ideas. I have to have 20% down. I'm buying in too expensive an area. I don't want this. Remember that these types of conversations are free.
Yeah.
Any mortgage professional that charges you for a consultation, you should go to the next one, is my point.
Run.
So it's free. It doesn't cost anything. You can do soft pull credit reviews. Everything can be very easy. And there are, even right here in the Bay Area, down payment assistance programs that work. There's opportunity, and the state of California is rolling out a new one this year. So it's always a good idea, and to have the conversations, even if buying maybe 2 or 3 years out. Plant your flag, understand what your challenges are, know what you need to do. And chances are you might find yourself in a better spot, but don't get discouraged, is I guess my message is, talk to somebody who has the best interest of your family in mind, and somebody like Christa, get them working for you. And then even if you decide not to buy, at least you've got yourself ready.
Yeah. And just don't use media as your source. And I had someone comment like, well, aren't you media? It's like, I'm talking big media. I'm talking massive syndication media, not what we're doing here. We're local. We're aware of what's happening locally. But I would say, don't source your information online. Actually talk to human beings that understand your situation and your market at the end of the day, and make sure that they actually know it. And that they don't just pretend like they do. So Jason, thank you so much for being here. Stick around for a second. And for those of you watching, thank you so much for being here. If you want to see more information just like this about the Bay Area, and specifically Morgan Hill and Gilroy, check out my other playlists, and I will see you soon. Thanks, Jason.